Hello, hello. Last minute change to the schedules. Dr. Susan is not feeling well. Hey, puppies. I got some doggos in here. Charlotte's back there on the couch. My other old man pupper is right here. We'll see if he shows his face today. His name is Koa. I just figured I'd hold our space for us. We will continue our eligibility discussion next week. We'll be going through all of the disability categories that are defined by IDEA and talking about what makes you eligible for each category, etc. We will do that next week. This week, we're just going to hang out and chat. I have a few articles that I've been holding on to that we can go through, and we can just kind of chat and hang out and see what's happening. If you are on replay crew, I would love it if you would please like and comment and do all the YouTubey things. The algorithm is just not loving me lately. I don't know why. I did something to upset the YouTube gods, but apparently I did. So yeah, if you can do those YouTubey things, that would be great. We are slowly plugging along towards that goal of 500 subscribers, and then it's about getting those watch hours up. I do have some great ideas for some fun things we can do with memberships, but we have to get to that monetization point before I can do that. So that's the goal. All right, I'm going to run the intro real quick and gather a few things up, and then we will just chat.
Hi, I'm Nicole, and as you have probably guessed, I have ADHD. I live and breathe all things ADHD in my personal, family, and professional life. I have a background in psychology and special education, and I've gained a lot of knowledge over the years about ADHD, what it really is, how it touches every aspect of your life and the life of your child, as well as a wealth of information and strategies for living with ADHD and parenting kids with ADHD. In this community, we share stories, we learn together, and we support each other as we navigate all things ADHD. Welcome.
Apparently Charlotte wants to join us today. This is Charlotte. She needs a groom. Charlotte is a standard poodle. Say hello, Charlotte. Charlotte is my youngest son's service dog. And she's amazing. We are celebrating this month having her in our home for 2 years. I can't believe how fast that's gone. Nope. Oh, place. She likes to, when she gets excited, she likes to jump on my other dog, and he doesn't appreciate it as much. He is 12 years old. See if I can get him to come say hi. Cole, come here. No, Charlotte, place. Cole, come here. Come here. No. Charlotte's like, me. Anyway, see if we can. Cole, come here. The rest of my office is a disaster, so I don't want to show it. Maybe I could get him to hop up on the couch back here. Koa, come. Come here. Aww. And they're off. Anyway, Koa is a Springer Spaniel Border Collie. Don't attack him, please. Charlotte, please. And he... Oh, there he is. Hi, buddy. Can you see him? The tippy top of his head. Over here. Hi, bud. He has been my little shadow for about 12 years. And only in about the last year has he started to act like he's not a puppy. He's fun. So, let's just do an icebreaker here, and then we'll jump into some things. Last time I pulled one of these, and it led me down like a 40-minute rabbit hole. So, we shall see if... I think the 90s ones are my best luck. So this was the one that sent me down the rabbit hole, if you haven't seen the story. What kind of car did you own in the 90s? I had some good stories. I'm going to clip that story and post it as a standalone video, but it is in a Random Tangents evening stream from a few weeks ago. So let's see if I can find one. Oh boy. I'm going to hold on to this. What was your favorite 90s hairstyle? Because we have been recently, I guess it hasn't been too recently. It was like November. Spent some time cleaning out my parents' basement because my dad has always been a borderline hoarder. He has recently been diagnosed with some dementia. Yeah, I'm not talking about that today. But so the hoarding has gotten a little worse and their house was just like buried. So we went and cleaned it all out. And I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bins of my family memorabilia that we are working on organizing and scanning and all of that good stuff. So I have some pictures that I will share. But so I'm going to hold this one out for a time when I have that a little bit more organized. Okay, I'm going to talk about this, but this says, do you remember the first time you used a computer at home? So let's talk about computers in my house in the 90s. So my dad was in business. He owned his own businesses a few times. And then he worked as a CFO, controller, money guy for most of his life. So he was kind of, I feel like, on the cutting edge of computers as far as work. And so we did have one of those like OG Apple computers. And I remember sitting, we had like a little mini TV that was like this big at the computer hutch in my dad's office. And I remember sitting and watching Punky Brewster and playing a couple of games that they had like it was like a wheel and a clicker. And I remember I had like it was like a summer Olympic sports one, and you would like click it to printer and run and go click, 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 and then hold it down together to long jump, and then you could like hurdle and stuff. I remember playing the clicky clickies. And there was a lemonade stand, like a lemonade tycoon type game that I would play while I was watching Punky Brewster. So that's probably my first memory of having computers at home. Was not like doing schoolwork on it or anything, because I was probably, let's see, it was in the house that we moved out of when I was 8. So it was between ages 5 and 8 that we lived in that house. So I remember that pretty specifically. But I very much remember in high school when we got the internet at home, dial-up, and I discovered things like chat rooms and MSN Messenger, and I have been obsessed with it ever since, which has probably led me to here. But I remember one specific time, because we had like rules and stuff, right? But my parents and my sister all had bedrooms on the top floor of our house, and my bedroom was in the basement. So there were 2 floors in between, and our computer was on the main floor of the house. And you can only use the internet. Like, if you were using the internet, no one could use the phone. So like, I couldn't spend hours and hours on it during the day. But I remember when being 17, I was a senior in high school, and just had gotten I wasn't AOL, because we didn't have AOL at home. I did have AOL Instant Messenger in college, but this was just done through like MSN instant messenger, like Hotmail, basically. And some of my friends had Messenger and we'd be on there. And I had this guy that I'd been dating who was a few years older, who had recently moved to a different part of the state. And I was like devastated, but my parent, like, I wasn't allowed to date him because he was older and he wasn't that much older. He was like 2.5 years older, but I was in high school and he was out of high school. So that was like, my parents were not thrilled with it. And so I would, sneak out of bed and late at night when they were all in bed upstairs and be chatting online. And I know I was such a rebel. It was like, my gosh, I'm having some confessions on some of these. It's a good thing that my parents don't really know how YouTube works because I would be having some conversations. Although this they did find out about because something happened in our city. There was a tornado, which does not happen in Salt Lake City often. And it was during the day. And anyway, some things are happening that night with one of my family members. And my mom picked up the phone to call the doctor to figure out what needed to be done to help this family member of mine and got that someone was online. And she came down and she was like, yeah. I mean, fortunately, she was more worried about the other situation, which ended up being fine. It was resolved. It wasn't anything major. But she was so busy, like, dealing with that I did not get into nearly as much trouble as I would have otherwise if I had been busted chatting online, in particular with this specific person that they didn't really want me spending time with at that point in my life. But yeah, I have always been kind of a technology. I get very involved in it. I really enjoy online community and relationships that can be held through online platforms. Interesting that I've been talking about this today. So I was wearing this necklace today. It has two parts. Part of it, I don't know if you can see it. And I can't my desk is in my way of getting me closer to my camera, but it has a semicolon on it. If any of you are familiar with the semicolon movement, it is try not to further anger the YouTube gods. It is a self-harming prevention movement. The idea that your story is not over. I bought this necklace on a friend of mine's birthday about 6 months after he removed himself from this life. He was a friend who 95% of our friendship was done through these kinds of online spaces. He was another one who was an early adopter of all of the different social media platforms and chat things, and who I would sit on AOL and MSN Instant Messenger when I was in college for hours and hours and hours chatting. Dear friend of mine, I miss him terribly. And I was missing him today, so I put on my semicolon necklace to remind myself, to tell the people in my life how much they mean to me. Because I wish I would have said more to this friend, and I'll tell more about his story at some point. Suffice it to say that your story is not over. You are important, and the people who love you will never be the same because you are in their lives now. And if you choose to leave, there's a path of destruction. And I understand that to get to that point, people really need to, they're not in their right minds. and that no amount of me telling them, please, please, please stay, the people that you love really do want you there, is going to change that. But maybe one person will reach out in that moment and continue their story. You matter. Yeah, that started one place and went somewhere else, didn't it? Okay. Let's move on from the depressing, because that's not what I had intended to talk about today. Where did I put that card that I was going to keep out? Oh, right here. I'm going to make sure I put it on top so I can get some pictures to share my lovely 90s hairstyles with you all in the future. Okay. So I've been reading up about sleep again, and I can tell you that it's because I'm doing a terrible job. I'm sorry, I'm going to eat a little bit because I was running late and I didn't eat my lunch, and I did take my meds, and I need to get some food on top of those meds or I'm going to get a stomach ache. So hope I will do my best not to chew in your ear. But let's pull up some things I have been reading. Was this the one? Maybe. This is the one about kids. But I'm sorry, I'm not 100% prepared because the plan was to do our Dr. Susan chat and talk about something else. So I don't have these pulled up just yet. But I have read a couple of interesting ADHD articles lately that I want to talk about. And yes, I'm wearing weird glasses today. And I guess maybe we could talk a little bit about Irlen syndrome. Irlen syndrome is a visual processing disorder. It is extremely common in neurospicy brains. It just is a way that your brain responds to specific, the way light enters. It's particularly problematic with artificial lighting, black text on a white background, or the opposite, black background with white text. I cannot handle. My eyes just go, "Ugh," like hurts my whole self. One of the things that you can do to help with it is to wear colored glasses. These are not Irlen lenses. These are cheap Amazon colored lenses that I got in like all the colors. So I could try them out and see if I felt like something like that would help me before I went and got an Irlen evaluation, which I did do. And I still haven't ordered my glasses because they're not inexpensive. And other things just keep coming up that take priority for those discretionary / medical funds. So I'm using these. They help a little bit. I also changed the coloring on my laptop to a little bit of a magenta hue, and that helps a bit. I don't use white paper if I can avoid it. And colored ink I use a lot, and that seems to help. But yeah. All right, hopefully you can't hear me chewing. I don't think my microphone's that good, but I gotta get some food in. Okay. Where is the article that I wanted to pull? Gosh, dang it. I had a really good one. Let's do this one. Maybe. All right, I'm gonna pull this up on my computer screen. Again, sorry for the being less than prepared today. talk a lot about women with ADHD on here because I am a woman with ADHD who was diagnosed late in life. Um, I've shared that before, that I was diagnosed, let's see, mm, 5 or 6 years ago. Had been kind of possibly coming to that conclusion a little bit on our own after learning more about what ADHD in women is like and having a husband who was continually further and further specializing in neurodevelopment. Um, and some of the things that had become extremely difficult for me to keep on top of, in particular when I had my third child. Now, that third child is on the spectrum, which he was not diagnosed until later. We knew there was some stuff going on. He also has ADHD. We knew he had ADHD. He had a mild language delay when he was a toddler. He caught up later on most of his language except for the pragmatic language. Um, but he also did not sleep through the night consistently until he was almost 8 years old. And his pregnancy was very hard on me. I was a little bit older. I was sicker than I was in any of my other pregnancies. It was a very stressful pregnancy due to I was high risk because of a complication that had happened in a previous pregnancy that we did not know about until my middle son was born. But yeah, that third pregnancy and that third baby kind of broke me. All the good systems and things that I had always done to stay on top of my life really just fell apart. I didn't have enough sleep to maintain them. My other children were older and getting involved in more activities and school and just things. It was rough go for a while there. And that's kind of when I started narrowing in on the fact that I may also have ADHD. And then when my third child was diagnosed, third of three, their psychiatrist looked at me and said, "Okay, which parent is it?" Because when you're three of three, there's clearly a genetic thing happening. And yeah, that was kind of when I didn't receive my formal diagnosis from a physician until a little bit after that when I decided to pursue medication. But yeah, all the signs were there and we started going forward as if I had that diagnosis just because of our background and knowledge, my husband's job, all of that. Made kind of formal diagnoses for our family a little bit of a different path because when your dad is like the most expert in the area in assessing ADHD and autism, and your grandfather also spent all of his career doing neuropsych evals. Yeah, formal evaluation just looks a little different. But that is a sidetrack. I did take my medication today. I just took it later, so it's going to kick in like 10 minutes, and then maybe I'll stop being so out there. But since I came to that diagnosis late, that's kind of my story. That's really what we talk about a lot here. And also the research in the field is expanding and a lot more adult women are seeking evaluations and discovering that they were either misdiagnosed or just missed entirely, and that some of the things that they've dealt with actually fall into this realm. So this article. Let me pull up here. I'm going to pull it off to its screen. Let's pull this article up. Where is it? Oh, that sounds like it's showing up something different. That's why I couldn't find it. Okay, I got it. So this is a study Add to screen. It talks about ADHD in women. And another reason why maybe more women are diagnosed later in life. So, study complex ADHD more common in women and girls, leading to later diagnoses. So, women are more likely to have complex ADHD, including comorbidities like depression and anxiety. Excuse me. Sorry. And inattentive symptoms, which may account for their later diagnoses, according to a new study. So, little summary right there. All right. Females are more likely than males to have complex presentations of ADHD, potentially leading to delayed diagnosis and treatment, according to new research published in the Journal of Attention Disorders. The study found that females with ADHD are more likely than males to have inattentive ADHD, are diagnosed at older ages, and have higher rates of anxiety and depression diagnoses both before and after their ADHD diagnoses. So, I mean, this is stuff that I've talked about quite a bit. We know that ADHD looks different in girls. They tend to either have more inattentive subtype or have their hyperactivity looks different. So, I am a combined type. However, I present primarily inattentive, but because my hyperactivity is more internal. I have a hyperactive brain. I call it hyperactivity of thought, right? The painting off the walls is not so much physical, but it's happening up in here. Sorry, my watch is telling me something. The retrospective observational study was conducting using data from 4 US health databases. The researchers sought to explore the relationship between sex as well as ADHD subtype and diagnosis timing. They also hoped to assess whether receiving an ADHD diagnosis had an impact on pre-existing diagnoses of depression and anxiety in women and girls who receive treatment for these comorbidities in higher numbers. I think there's definitely kind of a chicken and an egg thing in that, right? A lot of girls and young women are misdiagnosed with anxiety. Rather than ADHD because the presentation is different, but also living with ADHD can be very anxiety provoking. So I was diagnosed with anxiety for years. I have both anxiety and ADHD. But right, so some of the repeating thoughts. For example, for a long time, right now it's not an issue because I'm parking in the driveway. I'm not parking in the garage right now because our garage is full of stuff. But what are you chewing on? This dog loves tissues. It's very annoying. When I was parking in the garage, every time I would leave the house, I'd have this, oh no, did I close the garage, right? It would not go away. I would have to drive back and check and make sure I closed the garage or call a neighbor and ask them to check and see if I closed the garage. Now, the problem is that it wasn't a completely irrational worry because there have been plenty of times that I've driven away from the house and not shut the garage. And I had turned around and come back. And yes, in fact, the garage was wide open. Or I call my neighbor and say, hey, can you peek out? And they say, yes, your garage is open. I'll close it for you. So was that caused by anxiety? Or is that anxiety or anxious thoughts, those intrusive thoughts, come from lived experience with ADHD, right? The worrying I'm forgetting something all the time because I forget things a lot because ADHD, right? So it's like we always say in the clinic, ADHD rarely comes alone. I would say more than 90% of people who have lived with ADHD for any period of time have also experienced some level of anxiety or depression, either like concurrently or episodic, right? It's because living with ADHD is hard and trying to get through this life, this world that isn't built for our brains, um, can lead to anxiety and depression. So let's see what this study revealed. Age of ADHD diagnosis rates by sex and subtype. The study revealed the average age of ADHD diagnosis by gender for females 16 to 29 and males 11 to 23. And if you think about that, right? Like the difference between age 11 and 16, right? So we're looking at like upper elementary school, getting supports in middle school during those difficult transitions. And then 16, which is also interesting because, if you think about typically girls reach puberty earlier than boys, right? So there's like a lot of other factors in here that if you're comparing like developmentally and maturity wise, like that gap looks even a little wider. Being identified earlier and being able to figure those things out earlier. Yeah, this is interesting. Across both sexes, the average age of diagnosis by ADHD type. So inattentive types are typically identified later, so age 17 to 27, whereas hyperactive types ages 10 to 20. I mean, that's like completely different ages, right? We're talking like school age and then college and early adulthood. Females were substantially more likely than males to be diagnosed with inattentive ADHD. All right, how mood disorders fit into the diagnostic picture. Females were twice as likely as males to have depression or anxiety diagnoses and treatments in the year before their ADHD diagnosis. Twice as likely to be first diagnosed with depression or anxiety. Females were more likely than males to receive new diagnoses or treatments for depression or anxiety in the year following an ADHD diagnosis. So this one is more kind of the women are more likely to be misdiagnosed first, or the depression and anxiety is so, what's the word I'm looking for? Is more intense or more present or more overwhelming than the ADHD for that year before. But then even in that year afterwards, being diagnosed with ADHD first, females are more likely than males to receive those diagnoses for depression and anxiety. The number of females with pre-existing depression or anxiety diagnosis with symptoms that did not continue after their ADHD diagnosis was higher than the number of males. So these are the misdiagnosed, right? In these cases, ADHD may have been misdiagnosed as anxiety depression. Patients with inattentive ADHD were more likely to receive a prior diagnosis of depression or anxiety. Inattentive ADHD, 13 to 18% depression and 17 to 26% anxiety. So that inattentive ADHD is a high likelihood of being comorbid with anxiety or misdiagnosed as anxiety. Hyperactive, impulsive ADHD, 5% to 12% depression and 9 to 20% anxiety. So those are some really significant numbers, right? It's not just like a 1 to 2% difference. I mean, this is that and that 13 to 18% and 5 to 12%. Like, that's a big difference. Repercussions of delayed diagnosis. The study is finding that females are diagnosed 5 years later than males on average. Together with other key data points, lead researchers to conclude that diagnoses in females tend to occur only once ADHD symptoms become more severe, and underscores the importance of addressing this gap in health equity. The consequences of undiagnosed ADHD are dire, especially for women. Women who live undiagnosed until adulthood experience significant outcomes in the areas of self esteem, social interaction, and psychosocial well being, beginning in childhood and continuing into adulthood. Yeah, I can pretty much say all of those, right? So that was one of the big things when I did receive my diagnosis was I finally had a reason for the things that I struggled with that were making me feel bad about myself, right? I was a full-time stay-at-home mom at the time. I've always kind of had some sort of side work that I was doing, whether it was coaching, photography for a while, just because I have always worked. I've always had something and I needed it was more I need something for myself that doesn't have kid all over it. And it wasn't necessarily a lot of income producing ever. But I was really struggling with, and I still really struggle with those executive functioning household management tasks, right? Laundry, dishes, housework, meal planning, all that stuff. They are just not things that I have figured out. There were times that I had them better figured out and times less so. Right now is a very much less so. Fortunately, my kids are old enough that I can start to delegate some of the house stuff to them because I cannot keep on top of it. Um, and I have a husband who has really excellent executive skills and he keeps us afloat. But it was as a stay-at-home full-time mom in a area and culture that highly valued the stay-at-home mom, the homemaker. Um, I felt like a fraud a lot of the times. Like I didn't really know what I was doing, and everyone was going to figure out that I'm terrible at being an adult. This was what I'd always wanted to do. I had always, my entire life, planned on when I had kids at home being a stay-at-home mom. Um, while it's something that I highly valued. It's highly valued in my culture, I would say, of where I live in Utah, and in my faith is highly valued to have mothers who are home with their kids. Um, I mean, my mom always worked, but she worked like while I was at school. It never like I wanted to be home when my children were home. I wanted to be involved in their activities. I want to be where they were. I am still that way. I'm highly involved. Sometimes I get myself overly involved in what my kids are doing. I'm very much in the band mom life right now because that's where my kids are. I like to be where they are. I like to watch them doing the things that make them happy. I know that this period of time is short and going to go by very quickly, and I don't want to miss it. It's selfish as much as it is for them. But there were a lot of things about that being the stay-at-home mom, being the homemaker, being the, executive of the home that I really still to this day struggle with. And for a long time, it made me feel really, really, really bad about myself. And then I figured out, oh, there's a reason why I'm really bad at those things, and I'm really good at other things, and that this is just not my wheelhouse. And so I did things like hired cleaning help, which I don't have right now, and I'm desperate to get back. But again, my spend discretionary spending on mom comes last generally. Um, yeah. So I do not have my regular cleaning help right now, and that is something I am working towards getting back in, but I do send my laundry out. And it may be one of the very best things I've ever done for my own mental health because the laundry situation, it just always being there, always being this task that I should be doing that I can't get myself to do. Nobody having clothes when they're looking for them because they're usually clean, but in a laundry basket wrinkled up somewhere because they were never folded and put away. Or digging through laundry baskets in the morning to try and find things with like all of that was extremely stressful and made me feel really bad about myself. And now I have a laundry service. I put the laundry in the bags. I put it on the porch. It is picked up by the laundry fairies, cleaned, folded, and returned to me. And all I have to do then is sit down. It takes about a half an hour to sort it into piles and have everyone put their laundry away. I will never stop doing that. My husband wants the kids to all start doing their own laundry because they complain about when it's time to put it away. But I'm like, no, I'm not doing it because it becomes my responsibility to make sure that they're doing their laundry, and I'm not doing it. They do know how. They have all had to do some of their own laundry. They have learned that skill, so when they're out on their own, they can do it. But while they're here and it becomes a problem that I have to manage, sending it out. Social interaction is another one. I really struggled with friendships growing up. I had a lot of very significant and painful social situations that I did not understand what had happened. I would get myself into situations where I was bullied or um, because I wasn't reading the clues or understanding that I was bugging people until it was like way too late. Um, I recognize looking back now that I could be really obnoxious and a lot. And I am still that way. So the people who are my friends in my life now are people who know and enjoy that about me and are willing to deal with it when it becomes annoying, or they are people who are also a lot and we just are the same. My social circles are small. I mean, I am likable. I am funny and friendly and outgoing. But I can be a lot. And in elementary and high school, middle school and high school, like that led to some very painful social situations, some of which I've shared about before, some I will share more in the future. I'm not planning on keeping this stream longer than an hour, so I won't get into the details of it today. But looking back post diagnosis at some of these patterns, I can see where ADHD did impact my social relationships. And I didn't know what it was at that time. So now I get to look back and review this, and it does take some of the it helps me to process the situation, see what really happened, that it wasn't, that I necessarily did something wrong, but that I was different. And there was a reason why I didn't feel like I was fitting in, right? It was because my brain was operating differently than all these people. And, I went to some good therapy when I was in college that helped me. I was not diagnosed with ADHD at the time, but it did help me to see some of those social interactions for, that it wasn't my fault, that there wasn't something inherently wrong with me, that I didn't need to put up all of these walls and barriers between the front that I presented to the world and who I felt I really was, that person didn't need to be hidden, that there was not something wrong with her, right? I did process a lot of that, but that was 20, well, not quite 20, 15 years before being diagnosed with ADHD. And so now I get to go back through all of that and go, okay, so that's what was happening. It's very interesting to be able to go through all those things and kind of reevaluate what happened. Starting right here, women in these studies engaged in less task-oriented coping and more emotion-oriented coping, often turned to recreational drugs, alcohol, nicotine, and sex to self-medicate for symptoms of undiagnosed ADHD. I did not do those things. Not to say that I maybe wouldn't have, except that I grew up very religious and all of those things were um, things that were not in line with my religious beliefs. So that kept me from some of those types of self-medicating, right? I used other coping strategies that I would say were more emotion oriented, right? I put up a lot of walls. I definitely masked quite a bit. Um, and I did turn to technology, distraction, I think a lot of times as self-medication as opposed to, those specific things. But female attitude reader explains the lived experience of late diagnosis in this way. I've lived with the misleading belief that I was a loser, lazy, incompetent. What are the long-term impacts of these self-defeating beliefs? And I think if you are like me and are a person who was late diagnosed, this was it. I was lazy. I was bad at being an adult. I was never going to be able to do XYZ, and I should be able to because everyone else can around me, right? The complicating presence of mood disorders. The connection between ADHD and mood disorders, including depression, is well established. According to a recent study in BMJ Mental Health, people with ADHD are 9% more likely to have MDD, and MDD diagnosis increases the risk for ADHD by 76%. Um, that's pretty staggering. MDD diagnosis increases the risk for ADHD by 76%. I don't know if I would say increases the risk for ADHD because that suggests that ADHD is like when I think of it increases, like it increases the risk of broken arms, it increases the risk of substance abuse. Like it's something that may or may not happen. Whereas ADHD, like if your brain is wired that way, your brain is wired that way. So maybe this word would say instead of increases the risk, I would say increases the likelihood or the yeah, anyway. I also don't like that language. These findings are echoed in the responses to a recent attitude survey of 6,810 adults, which found that 72% reported having anxiety and 62% reported having depression. That's a lot. Like, that's rough. Like, ADHD symptoms itself are difficult to deal with. And then you're piling on anxiety and depression. Now, again, chicken and egg, right? Is the anxiety and depression a comorbid in that you have both of these things and they interact with each other, or is it caused by living with ADHD? And I would say it's both. We talk about, neurodevelopmental disorders. If you have one, you're much more likely to have another, right? So if you have, that's why there's so many twice exceptional, right? If you have one brain difference in the way your brain developed, makes sense that you're more likely to have other ways that your brain developed differently. Brain's already developing differently. So ADHD, autism, specific learning disabilities like dyslexia, dysgraphia, um, but also giftedness is itself a brain difference, right? So there's so much twice exceptionality because gifted brains are already different, more likely to have something like ADHD or another learning disability on top of being gifted, which is that twice exceptional that Susan and I talk about a lot. Because I was a twice exceptional kid that I didn't know it. And I have 3 twice exceptional kids, and she has 2 twice exceptional kids as well. So we do talk a lot about that because it is a population that has a lot of need that schools don't really know how to meet. But again, topic for another time. In addition to the overrepresentation of mood disorders among individuals with ADHD, previous research has documented that women in general are twice as likely as men to suffer from MDD and general anxiety disorder. So women are already more prone, right? MDD is major depressive disorder, if you're wondering. So major depressive disorder, the kind of general depression, and generalized anxiety disorder, as opposed to a more specific type of anxiety like OCD or things like that. So kind of overall depression, overall anxiety, right? So women are already more likely to have that. So women with ADHD are obviously going to be more likely to have it. Well, rates of mood disorders are unequivocally higher among women with ADHD than either men with ADHD or women without the condition. The new study lends credence to what many women have reported anecdotally. They are also more likely than men to have ADHD, initially misdiagnosed as depression or anxiety. Because of stigma and thought. So you're looking right there. Like if you're going into a psychologist and you're describing that you're struggling with this, that, and the other, they're more likely to think that you have anxiety or depression because it's more likely that a woman's going to have anxiety, depression than a man, right? So their first, oh, could it be, is going to go to anxiety, depression. It's not going to go to, oh, is it ADHD? So it's one reason why that misdiagnosis happens is these research trends that, give us, oh, you're more likely to have this than that. It's more likely to be horses than zebras, so we're not going to look for the zebras, right? Because of stigma and thoughts related to gender role representations, when females do present with ADHD symptoms, it can be thought that it's more likely due to anxiety or depression because those are presentations that people are used to seeing in females early on, explained Dave Anderson, PhD. So people say she's distracted because she's anxious or sad, not because she has ADHD. That's something that we're actively trying to fight, even in clinician bias. The new study and research like it helps shed light on the unique toll exacted on women by ADHD. More investigation is desperately needed, explains Dawn K. Brown, MD, in this article, which I will open up and we can look at another time. We demand attention, a call for greater research on women with ADHD. Further research regarding these topics is indeed crucial, Brown explains. By conducting in-depth investigations into the gender-specific nuances of ADHD presentation and impact, healthcare professionals, policymakers, and advocates can promote greater awareness, understanding, and tailored support for women with ADHD, which is why I'm here on the YouTubes telling my story and working towards telling other women's stories, well, other people's stories, but women in particular. So these are some of the research priorities detailed in that article. 1, sex differences in ADHD, the health consequences of delayed ADHD diagnosis on women, how hormonal changes impact ADHD symptoms in women, and they definitely do. How perimenopause and menopause impact ADHD symptoms and vice versa. The elevated risk for PMDD and premenstrual disorder and postpartum depression among women with ADHD. The safety and efficacy of ADHD medication use during pregnancy and while nursing. This is always hard. When it comes to psychotropic medications, anxiety meds, things like that, and pregnancy, they're limited in the kind of research that they can do, right? Because you can't do like a traditional research study of, we're going to have you take your meds and you take your placebo if you don't know what's going to happen to that person that takes their meds, right? Because you can't be putting the patient and the unborn child at risk in order to do the research. So there's not a lot of research on it. All we have really is kind of retrospectives of people who stayed on medication and what happened later. So the research is not great. That's why so many medications are marked for pregnant women as kind of, we don't know. We can't guarantee its safety. It's because researching it is essentially has built-in ethical problems, right? So this is just one, it's always going to be an issue when it comes to whether or not to stay on medications during pregnancy and whether or not they're safe. And many of them might be completely safe, but we can't necessarily do the research on it. And so it comes down to a decision between you and your doctor on what might be the outcomes of, some women stay on antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications because the risk of them going off of it is higher than any potential risk that might be there. Um, Simply because you have things like self-harming, severe postpartum depression, things like that that can happen from people who are off of their medications for an extended period of time while their hormones and things are all going crazy. Um, so yeah, it's not something that we have a lot of research on in with all types of medication, but you're talking about things like anxiety meds and ADHD meds, it's an issue as well. How ADHD medication adjustments during the monthly menstrual cycle could improve outcomes for women. That's really interesting. Lot more research happening these days. Well, hopefully continuing to happen right now. If you say the word female on a research paper, you automatically get flagged as being DEI. So problem, but hopefully that will get sorted out soon and they'll figure out that yes, we do in fact need to do these types of medical research that are being defunded at the moment. It's very annoying. But things, yeah, how hormones impact ADHD symptoms, and maybe you at a certain time of in your cycle, you might need a little bit more or a little bit less, depending on hormone mediations. It is something that is being researched, and I will continue to read up on what comes out about it because it is a topic that's being discussed a lot. I've noticed a lot more discussion in public spaces, social media, whatnot, about like perimenopause and how it impacts aspects of women's overall health and mental health. So this is all going to be really interesting. The long-term and short-term implications of hormonal birth control and hormone replacement therapy. Again, similar things like how do those hormones impact ADHD symptoms at different times and different stages of life? And can we maybe use alternate methods to help control some of that? How and why comorbid conditions like anxiety, depression, and eating disorders uniquely impact women with ADHD, and then early indicators of self-harm, partner violence, and substance abuse among girls and women with ADHD. That's a topic that we'll have to get into is, these I've talked about it a few different times, and I'm gonna add it to my list of topics. Here is outcomes. Outcomes for untreated or undertreated or undiagnosed ADHD. And then differences in women. There is a lot of research out there, long-term studies on untreated ADHD and what those outcomes look like, and they're not good. It's, huge, and not just like little numbers, but like huge increases in substance abuse, in incarceration, in just the life expectancy, in accidental death, in self-deletion. Huge numbers. I can give that to you kind of generally, but I do like to base what I share specifically in research. So I'm not going to make up any numbers right now, but I will get those numbers and we'll talk about it in the future because it is scary. It is scary. Anyway, that's the end of that article. I thought it was really interesting and brings up some interesting questions. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you have anything that you can add to the conversation, please do so in the comments. If you have any questions, how does it look for you? My goal here with this channel, the next thing that I want to do is really was what the original idea for the channel was, and that was a podcast, more interview based, that just tells ADHD stories. I just want to talk to normal people about what their ADHD path has been so that we can share these stories. I think it's important. I think it helps people to hear that they're not alone, to hear parts of their story told out loud, and to see that there are other people struggling with the same things. That's really what I want to do. I'm working out kind of how the best way to do that, because part of, getting people to come and do interviews like this is being able to offer them something in return. And right now I don't have the audience to attract some of the people that I would love to interview. So I'm working on figuring that out. If you have any ideas, or if you're someone who would be up for talking to me, please leave a comment. We can do it without video. We can do it as in-depth or as surface level as you would like, but I feel it. I just keep feeling this pull that is really important that we tell these stories. And that's really where I want to go next with the channel. I'm going to continue with our conversations on Tuesdays with Susan, because I think they're extremely helpful. She is a wealth of information, and we have plans for like the next 6 months of topics. But I do want to start figuring out how to add in these more podcast-like interviews to tell stories. And then I got a few other things to do too, where we can just be hanging out. But thank you so much for being here. If you haven't, do those YouTube-y things, leave a comment, like, subscribe, share with a friend. I'm hoping over the next couple weeks to cut up some little shorter videos that you could share with people, like little 1-minute YouTube shorts, but also shorter kind of 15 to 20-minute videos, to try and get people here, get this community that I know can be so powerful, gathering together more frequently and helping each other out. So that's it for me today. I'm going to get some other work done. I mentioned that I get myself overly involved in my kids' stuff. I managed to get myself appointed to the boosters of the marching band, and I am in charge of fundraising. So this is my busy season. So I got a lot of stuff to do for that, and then my regular work. And I have not been doing well on my productivity lately. A lot of that has to do with my sleep is a mess. My sleep schedule and my sleep routine is a disaster right now. I got to figure that out. But that is not what we're talking about today. I'm going to stop, because otherwise I'm just going to keep rambling. So I'm going to run the outro, and I'm so happy that you were here. If you were here, please do the YouTube-y things. And I know I keep begging for that, but the algorithm's not liking me. It is not showing my videos to anybody. I got to figure that out. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. Remember that you are not alone. You are not broken, and you're doing better than you think you are. And have a fantastic week. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. This video is not a substitute for counseling, psychotherapy, medical, or mental health care. The information and advice shared here should not be used in place of any form of diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Information provided here does not involve diagnosis or treatment of medical or mental or psychological disorders. If you feel the need for professional support, please seek a local professional in your area. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only.